Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. If you would give a second, you can go ahead and hit that subscribe button, leave a like. Any comments you can have, go ahead and drop them down below, and we'll get back to them in the next video. Today, we have probably going to be our resident SEC West expertise. We got Sean Richburg here, who's our Bama fan. That'll be a part of the crew. I think this video is just going to mainly be a lot of breakdown of the 2022 season. We're going to start from where everybody was in the preseason polls and then kind of where did they finish off. So I think the first group we're going to get into is going to be the SEC West. And jumping right off the bat, you got to talk about Bama. You know, they were the favorites coming in this season. Started out as the preseason number one in the West. You finished second with a 6-2 record. Only 2 losses coming against Tennessee and LSU. The Tennessee loss definitely came at the end of the game, and so did LSU. LSU had to go. We were in an overtime game in that game in order for them to pull that out. That went out, and even in those games, you looked good. You were competitive up until the very end. You got anything you want to throw in there about those games?
Man, absolutely. So Bama started off preseason poll with 158 first place votes, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, with 1,262 first place votes. You know, this season was, as a fan, it was extremely disappointing. I realized we had problems when Bama came to Austin. I was actually at that game, and being at the game, I could see that we had offensive line problems. I'm not saying that Texas was a world beater or whatnot, but the game did start early. It was an 11 o'clock kick. It was hot. It was like 102 degrees. Mm-hmm. The crowd was probably one of the loudest crowds I've ever heard inside of a football stadium, you know? Mm-hmm. So I said to myself, wow, I said, okay, we're going to have our work cut out for us. And what I noticed early in that game was Bama's secondary was very, very porous. Mm-hmm. Texas's quarterback, before he got hurt, was throwing the ball all over the field. DBs couldn't cover it. And that was Texas's plan going into that game. They exploited it, and it worked. Bryce Young was under duress the entire game. He was never comfortable that whole game. The offense didn't make any adjustments until the second half, and that's going into a whole nother issue with Bill O'Brien, the offensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. Bama fans, for the past 3 years since he's been there, have not been a fan of the play calling. Yep. None of that, right? So all of this reared its ugly head. There were a couple of bright spots, though. Jahmyr Gibbs was Alabama's leading receiver, which is very unusual for a Bama coach team by Nick Saban. When's the last time a running back was the number one? Not just receptions, but yards. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Bama's usually known for having a stable of receivers, if not 3 top guys that are dominant for almost the entire season.
Right. You know, and the running backs just run the rock. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I saw those issues back. I think that was week 2 or week 3 in the season, and like I said, I was at that game, and man, we had to kick a field goal at the end to win it. You know, and you know, when we talk about the losses, so that Texas game was what I would consider a legit potential loss. Mm-hmm. The Tennessee game, man, I didn't realize Tennessee was as good as they were at the time. Yep. But they just put on a performance that I've never seen from Tennessee. And again, they lit up that secondary. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think that teams found out very early that if you could throw the ball effectively, you could put a dent in Bama and you could put yourself in a position to win. And that's exactly what Tennessee did. That's exactly what Texas did. That's exactly what LSU did. That's exactly what Texas A&M did, right? I mean, that's 4 games that we played this season where it came down to the last play, and we just weren't good enough to get it done, man.
Right. I hear you. And you go back to that Tennessee game. I think that was the first game I saw in a long time where you had a quarterback throw for over 350 yards. He had 5 touchdown passes in that game, 1 interception, you know, that's on 21 of 30 passes. So it's not like he was throwing it 50 times or whatnot. It was only 21 completions. Right. And still got that bad. And even y'all's defense stopped the y'all stopped the run that game. I think their leading rusher, 12 carries, 71 yards, no touchdowns, was
Yeah.
good, but it was literally just as you were saying, that pass defense was
Yep.
was a problem. Do you think when it comes to Bama and the receivers, was that more so to do with them being young, or is it just this group of receivers at Bama are just kind of not where where the Bama standard has been in the past?
Dude, it's quite unusual. It'd be a different story if John Mechie and Jamison Williams and Amari Cooper and
Yep.
Julio Jones and all these guys that have come through and they're doing things in the league right now.
Yep.
If Bama proved that they could develop wide receivers, they could recruit them, they could develop them. Bama always gonna have a quarterback around them. This receiver group, in my honest opinion, just really wasn't that good. The kid from Georgia, Jermaine Burton, never showed up.
Yep.
The transfer from Louisville, the guy we got out the transfer portal, never showed up. And it's not like Nick Saban or Nick Saban coach team, as well as they recruit. It's not like them to not have serviceable receivers, but these receivers were serviceable at best. You could put any one of those receivers on any other team in the SEC, and they would not have been breakout players. They're just average receivers, right?
Right.
So, it's got to come down to missing on evaluation for this particular group because they're just not there. It's not like they didn't have the quarterback to do it. Bryce Young was reigning Heisman Trophy winner.
Yeah.
And a lot of it could have been because of the offensive line too. They were not that good either. So Bryce didn't have as much time as he had the year before. So there was a lot of things that went on with it, but all of it was extremely uncharacteristic of an Alabama coach, Nick Saban coach team.
Right. And a lot of people even would argue that when it came to Bama this year, those two losses being losing those games the way you lost them, where it literally came down to a last play of the game. And I mean, you got to still give a lot of credit to Bama, and even had those talks of shit. They made it into the playoffs at the end of the season over a TCU team, or I believe that Ohio State and Michigan did deserve to get in, but I definitely thought that fourth spot, I was one of the people who didn't believe TCU was somebody that should have deserved to get into the playoffs. I thought Bama would have, because you look at Bama, they played a lot of their best football at the end of the season.
Correct. Yeah. And they would have made a run. They wouldn't have beat Georgia, but they would have made a run. They would have made it to that final game, and it definitely would not have been 65-7.
Exactly. Because even if you look at that Kansas State game, that bowl game, that being a 45-20 game, from the time of kickoff in that game, I think anybody watching that game knew, all right, Kansas State is not, they can't be on the same field as Bama. So in saying that, what turn or what changes do you make heading into next season? Like, who's going to be the guy now that you don't have Bryce Young, a veteran, Heisman Trophy winner behind center? And I'm not sure if they fixed the receiving issues yet. And you lose Gibbs, who was a yard getter, your production guy on the offensive side of the ball. Where do you turn to try to right this ship to get it back going in the right direction?
Man, I think they're making some good decisions right now in revamping the coaching staff, right? I think we're in the process of looking for a new offensive coordinator right now. Some pretty big names are kind of up for that. Nick Saban usually does a really good job with his coaching hires. The defensive coordinator, Pete Golding, took a lateral move to Ole Miss. If you ask me, I'm gonna say Nick Saban probably told him it was just time to go, and you go ahead and just get you another job. There's no reason you leave Alabama and go to Ole Miss, right?
Right. So, without it kind of being the writing on the wall, it was kind of, hey, either we can fire you and that get put on your record, or you choose to walk on your own.
Correct. And that's one thing that Nick Saban's pretty cool about. He doesn't fire many assistants. He's a very well-respected, hard to work for, but very well-respected coach in the Southeastern Conference and country. When it's time for someone to go, I think they have conversations behind closed doors, and these folks just find other jobs, and it just kind of goes away. You know what I mean?
Yep.
These coaches don't end up with the scrutiny of having to have been fired by Nick Saban,
Right.
Recruiting wise, this class, I think, that we've got was the number one class in all of the recruiting services by a nice margin. He did address a lot of the areas of concern, like he always does.
Right.
But I don't know anything about these kids. We won't know it until we get ready for spring ball.
Yep.
I would have to have faith in the fact that he's got some people that can fill these holes and make sure that the same thing that happened this year doesn't happen again.
Yep. Can I definitely say that Nick is probably one person who's going to adjust out of anybody in college football. He knows what's going wrong in that facility and how to what spots he needs to plug in and whatnot. Now, do you go with Jalen Milroe next season?
I like Jalen Milroe. Do you remember when Blake Sims was the quarterback?
Yes.
Now Lane Kiffin was the offensive coordinator now.
Right.
But I thought to myself, ain't no way in the world Blake Sims can become a serviceable quarterback. And this dude almost won the whole thing, you know.
Right.
Jalen Milroe is Blake Sims on steroids. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If he can get the right coaching, and they can design the right game plan week to week for Jalen Milroe as he grows as a starting quarterback, I believe by the end of the season, he's going to be somebody that you really got to deal with because he's big. And I think he's the fastest kid on the team.
Right. I think they were mentioning that in I forgot what game it was that he was the starter. And was that the Arkansas game where he played majority of that game?
And he broke out and he just ran by everybody.
Yeah. I mean, you see the leg talent there, but I think the one skill set when we did see him this season that he kind of was needed some work on was the passing. Yep. I don't know if he's got the strongest arm in the world, or maybe it's just you have to bring in somebody that can make a scheme, like you were saying with Blake Sims and Lane Kiffin. Like, hey, how can we play to his strengths? And that, I guess, thinking about it now, can be something that helps even the receivers. If you show him as a running quarterback more so than not, defenses have to adjust. They've got to come bracket him in. You can't let him escape out because otherwise he's gone. And that can open up some one-on-one opportunities for the receivers on the outside. So that could work around. That could work out all the way around.
That's right. And there's another kid that they've got back there behind Milroe. My honest opinion is I think this other kid's probably going to win the job because he's just more of a talented pocket passer.
Which is what Lane likes. I mean, not Lane. That's what Nick likes. Yeah,
that's what he likes. You know, and that kid is going to be able to manage the game, similar to Jake Coker, AJ McCarron, Greg McElroy. He's that kind of quarterback.
Yep.
You know, if he shows that he's not going to make a lot of mistakes and give the ball away, then he'll end up being the one to get the start. But we'll see. We'll have confidence in whoever they put back there at the end of the day.
Sounds good. So we're going to move on to the next team on the preseason was A&M. Texas A&M was projected to finish second in the West this season. You turn that around, they ended up finishing last in the West. Yep, man. Finishing with a 5-7 record. And I think right from the jump, you could tell after that Appalachian State game that something was going wrong in that A&M program. And for one, I do not know. Based on the recruiting they did, the portal class they brought in, the recruits they brought in.
Yep.
To me, from the outside looking in, it's hard to sit here and say what exactly went wrong with A&M.
Man, I'll tell you this. I don't know why Jimbo struggles with consistency.
Yep.
You know, that is his problem. Jimbo won a national title at Florida State. And he was calling plays then, but he also had Kelvin Benjamin. He had Jameis Winston.
Yep.
He had a squad, right?
Yep.
Auburn almost beat him, but he had a squad. I don't necessarily know, even though he's recruiting talent at a very high level, I don't necessarily know if the evaluation is good because we're either seeing these kids not make it onto the field as impact players or they're leaving, you know?
Right.
So I would have to start there with the evaluation process. Instead of trying to go out here and get all these 5 stars, I'll take a solid 4-star that I evaluated that has a very high ceiling. Right. I got a feeling a lot of these recruits that Jimbo has recruited, they probably had some character issues. And they were already at their ceiling.
Yeah,
you know, there was nothing more that you could do to develop them, so they weren't going to be any better than they were when they walked in the door. You know, the other problem, in my opinion, is Jimbo has to, and he's addressed this, but he has to let the play calling duties go to somebody else.
Right. That was a big topic of discussion at the back half of the season.
Dude, it's huge. When you are the CEO of a company, you don't go out there and run the sales team.
Right.
You know. You don't manage HR, right? You put people in positions to do that, and you run the organization.
Yep.
I'm thinking that that's going to help. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the Bobby Petrino hire per se as the offensive coordinator, but if you're going to get someone that knows how to call plays, and you can't get Lane Kiffin, and you can't get Lincoln Riley, you can't get the guy that got fired from Texas, you can't get Steve Sarkisian. You know, Bobby Petrino is probably somewhere from a X's and O's perspective, probably just as good as those guys. So we'll see what happens. There is still talent there, but Jimbo has to let that go so he can run the team, because there are a lot of mistakes made in game that if he was paying more attention to the game, clock management type issues, you know what I'm saying, stuff like that. He can be a CEO, and I think we'll see how good of a coach he really is, because right now he don't look like a good coach.
Right. And it's looking like, I mean, this is Texas money you're looking at. You have another season like this one, you got to start asking the questions. How much longer is Jimbo going to be there?
Right.
That question is going to start getting asked. And you got to think, with this OC hire with Petrino, did he cripple and kind of break down and have to make the splash hire to win the fans back? Or was this a educated, I know this guy is somebody down the line that could work out in the long run?
Yeah, I think it was an educated decision. It in my opinion, it's not a splash hire just because of his history, but people that know and understand football and go back and look at how he was dialing up plays when he was at Arkansas, when he had them in the top 5 a couple of years in a row, competing, playing competitive games against Bama. You know, the guy's a genius when it comes down to drawing up plays and getting them executed properly. So, flash hire, no. Educated decision, X and O's, yeah, that's what it was.
Yep. And so another thing you got to ask for A&M, where do you go quarterback wise? Is it time to hand the reins over to the freshman they had come in at the end of the season? Do you go with Wyman? I think is how they pronounced it. And in my opinion, I think that's the right decision. I mean, you got that experience at the end of the season, let him ride it out, and now he's got game management and game SEC experience. And he went and he was the guy that was in there and beat LSU the last game of the season. Even though, in my opinion, I think they kind of caught LSU sleepwalking after they had locked up the West.
Yeah,
but still, you know, that's a quality win under his belt right there from the jump.
Definitely gives them a way to go for the future. I think Haynes King ended up with about 1,200 passing yards on the year. He was okay. They let Zach Calzada walk out the door. I thought Zach Calzada was a good quarterback, and that's not just because of how he played in the Bama game the year before last. But again, you have a hard time holding on to talent. You know, it's all about that CEO. But yeah, I think the young kid is going to be the quarterback. They recruited well this past cycle. They still got some of that talent from the cycle before. You know, the staff just needs to get together and make sure they're developing them properly and go from there. But yeah, if he has another season like that next year, I think he's out. He's out. He's out, because he's about to get passed up. He's about to get passed up by Auburn. He's about to get passed up by Arkansas. Even though they didn't have a great season, they have they're very well coached. You know, and you also got, you know, you still got potential problems with Ole Miss because Lane Kiffin can dial up plays for any situation.
Right.
Yeah. Definitely so they got to do it now or never.
Yep. All right. So after A&M, next up on the preseason board, they had Arkansas listed as the 3rd best odds, or voted in as the finished 3rd in the West.
Yeah, man.
They started out, they finished 5th, you know, finished with a 7-6 season. Everything was kind of rolling for them. You know, you go on your 3-game winning streak at the beginning of the season, get ranked. And I think the wheels just kind of fell off after that. They took a loss to A&M, which is one of A&M's kind of only wins last season. And after that, they kind of that was a hard stretch they went through. A ranked A&M team who was 23 at the time. Then you run into Bama, who's 2nd at the time. Then you got Mississippi State, who's 23rd at the time. And that just back to back, I think just kind of beat them up. And then after that, you know, it's hard to get it back rolling again.
Oh yeah, I think it was too much for a young program, right? But you know, they were riding high from the end of the season before,
right?
and they came into the season, they were still carrying that momentum. Quarterback got hurt though.
Yep. And this I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is 2 years in a row that KJ has gotten hurt.
Yeah.
In the middle-ish time of the season, and that's what's kind of plummeted the season for him.
Yeah, and he's a definite difference maker. I mean, look, if Bryce Young gets hurt and can't play in a few games, Bama may have lost 4 games this year. You know what I mean?
Right.
So KJ was extremely instrumental. They did lose a big time wideout to the NFL. I didn't necessarily see him basically get replaced on the field. You know, his production didn't get replaced. He helped KJ out a lot, especially on some of those deep throws, because he was going to go up and get that 50-50 ball. Arkansas just needs to make sure that they continue to recruit at a high level, because I have a lot of faith in their coach and their coaching staff. They just got they got to get more talent in.
Right. So now with them, speaking of coaching staff, they just lost their offensive coordinator to TCU. So was it more so of Briles calling those plays or drawing those plays on offense for KJ Jefferson, or was it the Sam Pittman kind of system? Even though I think Sam Pittman is a great coach, don't get me wrong. I think he's got that program heading in the right direction. But now you trying to pull in. I mean, I think the rumors came out today, or maybe it did come out today, that they hired the offensive coordinator from Maryland. Who was the offensive coordinator for Tua's brother over there. How good is he going to be if he's the guy that they bring in to try to run this offense to get it kind of flowing again in the right direction?
I'll tell you, I saw a couple of Maryland's games this year, and because just watching Talia. But I like the way their offense worked, and Maryland's head coach is Mike Locksley, who was very successful as an offensive coordinator at Alabama. So what Arkansas is hoping for is that the OC under Mike Locksley learned enough under Locksley. How much did he get from Locksley that he could get and transfer to Arkansas? It's going to be a wait and see type of thing. But I like Maryland's offense in the 2 games that I saw them play. They just didn't have the athletes to compete. But from an X and O's perspective, I like what that guy could do.
Yeah. Totally agree. And we'll see what they can do next season. I mean, hey, you got a lot in front of you. You know, you're recruiting well over at that program. And like I said, I do think that Sam Pittman is the guy for that job right there. You see him, he's the definition of Arkansas football.
He is, man. man, he kind of reminds me of Brett Bielema, man, kind of old school, tough nose. He's a defensive guy. He's gonna make sure that the trenches are taken care of, offensive and defensive lines. And he's gonna make sure all that stuff is working like it's supposed to. And he's a CEO, right? He's a CEO. He delegates very, very well. So he manages the game very well. So again, yes, to your point, very good coach. He is the guy. They need to do everything they possibly can to keep him long term.
Yep. So the team they have ready to finish 4th in the West was Ole Miss. Ole Miss predicted to finish 4th, and they did finish 4th. Finished with an 8-5 season. Had some good wins, but another kind of up and down season for Lane over there at Ole Miss. And now, with Jackson Dart, they added 2 more quarterbacks to that quarterback room, which has to have you thinking, all right, hey, spring is going to be a battle. Jackson Dart does not have this job locked up going into next season.
Right. Yeah. And honestly, I don't know if Jackson Dart, because of the 2 quarterbacks that they just brought in, it doesn't make any sense why you bring those 2 in and Jackson Dart, your starter from last season, is not there. I think Ole Miss's issues, I'm going to say this, Lane Kiffin is a better play caller than he is head coach or CEO.
Okay.
Lane Kiffin, to me, still acts like a child. Lane Kiffin had learned a lot from Nick Saban. But if you go back and look at how he left that program, again, Nick Saban didn't fire him, but he left right before the national championship game a few years back, and Sark came in and coached in the championship game. Lane Kiffin can't get out of his own way. Lane Kiffin can recruit. Lane Kiffin can develop quarterbacks. Lane Kiffin can draw plays up with the best of them. Lane Kiffin takes too many risks. He goes for it on 4th down on his side of the 50 way too often. He thinks he can't be beat. I like Lane Kiffin. I like him. But he will always have more success as an offensive coordinator than he will as a head coach. He
Okay.
just can't get out of his own way, man.
Right.
That running back that they have, lights out.
Yeah.
Lights
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Quarterback was good enough. You know what I mean?
Right.
Defense was good enough.
Right, because you started out on a 7-0 run.
Right.
You know, you
started good enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But what happened was, as soon as we found out, and everybody knew Brian Harsin at Auburn wasn't going to be there. He wasn't going to finish out the season, right?
Yeah, right.
I think Lane Kiffin wanted that Auburn job. He lost his focus. He's already childish. Then he lost his focus. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It just went downhill from there. Lane Kiffin needs to focus on his job, be a CEO, continue to draw up plays. He don't have to call them, draw them up.
Yep.
And continue to recruit. Everything is there at Ole Miss for him. Yep. But I believe Auburn, they may have looked at Lane for a minute, but I think they want to freeze the whole time. And it looks like they made the right decision.
Yeah, it's looking like it, especially with some of the recruits they're pulling in. He's starting to kind of rebuild that team going on right now. Let's jump into Mississippi State real quick. They were projected to finish 6th. They ended up finishing 3rd. I think that had some more so to do with other teams kind of dropping some losses that they weren't supposed to do. That kind of middle of the pack team. You finished 9-4. Of course, you know you have the passing of Mike Leach at the end of the season.
Yes.
That kind of really impacted them. But going into next year, you are bringing back a veteran quarterback when Will Rogers coming back for another year at Mississippi State.
Man, absolutely. Will Rogers threw for almost 4,000 yards. He had a few games, man, where he was just lighting people up. Now, what we're gonna have to find out is Mike Leach was a genius.
Yes.
Okay? He was a genius. Mike Leach won basically everywhere he was. He developed quarterbacks everywhere he was. His quarterbacks typically led whatever conference he was in passing yards and touchdowns. He's the Mad Hatter. I'll be curious to know if Will Rogers is going to have a similar year this year coming up as he had last year, because Mississippi State's head coach, God rest his soul, was a hell of a quarterback developer. You know what I mean? His offensive scheme was just fantastic. And I think that team that was recruited, the team that's currently there, was recruited to play Mike Leach's system. Mm-hmm. I think they're going to take a step back this year because the new coaching staff, they're not interested in running the air raid. You know what I mean?
Right.
And where the air raid really works is, of course, you got to have the quarterback, you got to have receiver, but you got to also have offensive line. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And while those pieces are there, again, those pieces were designed for Mike Leach's system. Mm-hmm. This coach is coming in with Mike Leach's players because Mike Leach was such a special talent as a coach, and his system was so unique.
Yep.
I got a feeling that Mississippi State is going to have to rebuild altogether. Yep. I don't think we're going to see them in good shape for the next 2 or 3 years, and that's assuming that the new coaching staff recruits at a high clip.
Yeah, so, that's true.
So I would have to say that losing Mike Leach is going to really set Mississippi State back for a long time.
Definitely. Yeah. And then let's squeeze in last team in the West. You got Auburn. They were projected to finish last, 7th. They ended up finishing 6th. They went on a real good run with Cadillac Williams at the end of the season. You saw those players in that locker room more motivated and played harder than they did. A lot of that, and I think the more still had to do with how they disliked Brian Harsin.
Right.
But yeah, you got to change coach. You bring in Hugh Freeze now in the offseason. You know, I'm not sure what direction. I think Hugh Freeze can get them on the right track. I think it's going to take maybe a year or 2 to really see some progress kind of happening. You will. I think this season they'll squeak out some games maybe that they shouldn't have, especially early. But you know, it really is going to be a question mark now with the changeover at Auburn.
Yeah, it is. Brian Harsin did not do the Auburn Tigers any favors on the recruiting trail at all. At all. He basically did not recruit for 3 years. You know what I mean?
Yep. Right.
And it showed on the field. So to your point, Auburn's going to have an uphill fight for probably 2 or 3 years. But the most genius thing that Auburn did was they kept Cadillac Williams on that sideline.
Yes.
Cadillac Williams he's a recruiter. He's the energy. He's an alum. of
Yep.
Auburn. He
Yep.
loves the school, right?
Yep.
I was kind of under the impression that they needed to go with him, go ahead and promote him.
I thought
Right.
so, but what
The
kind of
head
got me
coaching
was
position.
is the experience level for an
Right.
SEC program. Will you go with him as your head coach going forward, or bring in somebody
Yeah.
with a bigger name? And I do think it was great that they kept him on the staff. I do believe he definitely deserved to stay on that staff in some capacity. But you did kind of have that question at the end there of was he good enough to really keep that job for the long
to
run?
keep it, right? And I think, you know, they laid an egg. Well, they didn't lay an egg against Bama. Bama just beat them.
Yep.
And again, back to our point earlier about Bama, you know, teams that caught Bama late really got all the smoke. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And Auburn, you know, Nick Saban was trying to get style points at that particular point in time to try to get into the top four.
Yep.
And of course, it didn't work. But no, Cadillac is going to be great for that staff. I like Hugh Freeze. I was always scared to play Hugh Freeze when he was at Ole Miss. He knocked Bama off twice at Ole Miss. He had some tremendous talent, right?
Right.
If Hugh Freeze does what he did at Ole Miss at Auburn, because he's going to be able to get better players to Auburn than you can to Ole Miss.
Right.
Auburn's got more NIL collective money than Ole Miss. He's got more to work with now than he had at Ole Miss.
Right.
I give Hugh Freeze 3 years, and he will be contending for the West.
Okay.
And some of that is going to be because Nick Saban is not going to be at Alabama anymore. So the West is going to get wide open. And that's just my opinion, right?
Within 3 years.
Within 3 years. Within 3 years.
Okay.
I think one more championship and Nick is gone.
Okay.
3 years max if there's no championships. But yes, if Hugh Freeze can do what he did at Ole Miss, it's going to be better at Auburn. I say watch out for Auburn, and I can't believe I'm even saying it because I can't stand it. Right?
Right.
But being objective, I think Hugh Freeze at Ole Miss should make everybody scared in the SEC, especially in the West.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely hear you there. Definitely hear you there. So that'll round out our West discussion. We're gonna go ahead and I guess we'll split this into a part 1 and part 2. So we're getting ready to go ahead and shoot out part 2. So hope you enjoyed this video. Like I said, leave any comments. We'll get to them in the next video. Hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next one.
Sounds good.